Hello everyone, welcome to my Outlast, Whistleblower DLC, Insane Difficulty walkthrough, and this is another short piece of content that is a little bit shorter than Outlast 1, but it's way shorter than Outlast 2, and I've trimmed out a lot of the moments where you're in cutscenes and you're in waiting moments like that, where you're waiting for a scene to progress so that you can actually leave the area, and you might have noticed that I've skipped directly to this chapter because the prologue chapter you're doing absolutely nothing, and the great thing is, on Insane Difficulty, the game gives you a checkpoint after the prologue sequence, so every time you die, you restart from that room where you get the camcorder. As I stated in my Outlast 1 walkthrough, if Outlast 2 embraced this mentality and they actually placed the checkpoint for Insane Difficulty after that stupid prologue sequence, I wouldn't have so much of an issue with Insane Difficulty, but it would still be an issue, nonetheless, because Outlast 2 embraces a lot of bullcrap. But let's not talk about Outlast 2 until I get to that walkthrough. Right now, we're just trying to get out of here, and we're playing as Wayland Park, someone who was formerly affiliated with Murkoff, and he was trying to expose Murkoff's wrongdoing to the world, but they caught on to him, and they made him a patient, and they exposed him to the morphogenic engine, which is why you're seeing that hallucination just then. I'm not too sure what exactly that hallucination is doing right now, but it doesn't seem to impact Wayland whatsoever. I'm honestly surprised that he hasn't developed any kind of psychopathology aside from that occasional visual hallucination. And he still seems like the same person, and it's not very clear how long Wayland was inside of that room just staring at the morphogenic engine. I mean, he describes it as being hours, maybe even weeks, but I doubt he was staring at the morphogenic engine for weeks, because I think his brain would have been rotten at this point, and I think his muscles wouldn't exactly be strong right now if he was just sitting in that chair for weeks. And we're encountering Frank Manera right here. Frank Manera is going to be the primary variant we'll be encountering in the hostel area, but he's very easy to get past, although for some unknown reason, you can't push him out of the way. Every other variant you encounter, you can push him out of the way, but for some reason with Frank Manera, you can't push him, and this can be very annoying when you're trying to run past him, and somehow he's able to get past that entire rib cage just to grab the heart and then gulp it up in one gulp. How is that possible? And I think that's one of the main things that Red Barrel seems to embrace when it comes to really questionable moments like that, that catches the viewer's attention as to how unrealistic that is. And that's probably why a lot of people just find the Outlast series very appealing, because it embraces a lot of really weird moments like that. And we're just running past Frank Manera right now, and the door you need to go through is on your right. And you can tell by the light that is ahead that something important is in this room, and it's this opening in the wall right here. A lot of people missed that on their very first playthrough, and now we're still running. He's going to appear again once we get through the door that this one variant manages to break through. And we're about to experience a lucky pass moment when we get to the crematorium, because, like I mentioned before in my Outlast 1 walkthrough, the Outlast series embraces a lot of lucky pass moments to accommodate for the fact that the main character cannot fight back, and instead they just opt for seemingly inescapable situations that somehow the main character is able to escape from, because this invisible force ends up saving him and causes an event to happen. So right here, Frank Manera is going to try to cut into you, but then he decides, oh, I think this meat would be better cooked. So he's going to try to cook you in the crematorium. And then somehow, the back wall of this crematorium is broken, so Wayland is able to escape without any kind of burns to himself. If this was any other game, you'd be dead. This would be a death animation that would play if you didn't successfully escape from this guy. But I guess that's not what the developers were trying to go for with this unrealistic approach to horror, which is why I call it a horror simulator. Because in the moment, you're scared, but when you look at it as a whole, there's nothing to really be scared about when the main character can't fight back. Any game where they make the main character not fight back is not going to have moments where the cutscenes are actually going to be scary. In fact, I'm honestly surprised that Miles Upshur, Wayland Park, and Blake Langerman are all incredibly agile individuals, and you'd think with such agility they would be able to fight back against the enemies, but they can't for some reason. They don't try to knock them out or anything if they're afraid to kill. They don't try to use anything in the environment to dispatch the enemies so that they don't have to get in close with them. In fact, when it comes to Blake, Blake runs so fast in Outlast 2. I'm honestly amazed he doesn't try to push enemies out of the way if he builds up enough momentum. when their backs are to him, he should be able to push him out of the way, but he doesn't do it. It's so silly. And right now, I'm trying to get past Frank, but he's just not letting me pass because the pushing doesn't work. And I'm very lucky that he didn't try to kill me just then, because the enemies gain quite the confidence boost whenever you take damage, because they run faster than you do. But I managed to get past him, and he will not follow you through these shimmy spaces. Chris Walker can actually grab you out of those shimmy spaces. That's something I forgot to mention in my first walkthrough. Even if I forgot to mention it, it doesn't matter, because there's never a moment where Chris is going to get enough time to grab you out of those shimmy spaces, because you're so much faster than he is, and you already know how to manipulate his AI if you watched my previous walkthrough. And going back on what I was talking about with the fact that the main characters can fight back, a game I want to talk about that presents the whole idea of the main character not really having the capabilities to fight against the enemies, but instead opts for another option, is A Plague Tale: Innocence. In A Plague Tale: Innocence, Amicia does not have the ability to fight against the enemies in hand-to-hand combat, but she relies upon a sling in order to kill the enemies. And the first time she kills an enemy, it deeply disturbs her, but she does everything she can to protect Hugo by any means necessary. You know, she's living in a very hostile world, and she has to do whatever it takes to survive. And after undertaking the journey for such a long time, she eventually develops the hatred and confidence necessary to take a life, and she's been so desensitized by the violence. And you would think the same case would apply to the characters in the Outlast series, where they've been so desensitized by all the violence that nothing surprises them anymore. But sadly, it doesn't translate into their ability to deal with the enemies. Instead, they just get all these lucky passes that completely make the enemies feel like pushovers and babies. And there's never any situation or any kind of scenario where they are forced to fight back. Like, you know the keys we've been collecting? I'm honestly surprised that there aren't any enemies that have keys on their person, and we have to somehow get it off of them. And the only way you can possibly do that is to dispatch them, and that should be a moment in this entire game, and also in the other games, that comes across as being very disturbing for the character, but they eventually have to recover because they know they have to get out of there because they're in a very hostile environment. Like, that is exactly how a human being responds. But yeah, these guys, they don't even need to undertake that because they have this guardian angel protecting them, essentially. And right now, that is the end of Frank Monero. Frank Monero is a piece of cake. And by the way, when you mantle over the decontamination area and you turn on the valve, you need to make sure you walk, because there is a chance that Frank will be camping by the door that leads back into that area, which is bullcrap. So make sure you do not sprint. But now we have a bit of a quiet moment. This is all just speedrunner territory right here. Speedrunners do a lot of really funny things in this part, and we're about to get a jump scare for some reason. Look at this. For some reason, you trip, and it happened while it was in the air. That was pretty hilarious. Yeah. Once again, this game embraces way too many jump scares, and one of the ways I know that this game tries to opt for jump scares rather than, like, atmosphere is that the audio options are not very good, because there's only the audio option for disabling all audio. You cannot control sound effects, music, and voice volume separately. So I think the main reason for that is to make sure that the jump scares are very loud and that the player is not trying to silence them, which I think is just a very dumb move. But seeing as how there's nothing really happening here, I'm going to talk about a couple of things. This game has a lot of unpolished to it because it's not really a AAA title. This is more of an indie title. And I believe Outlast 2 was more of a AAA title, but even then it had a lot of it unpolished because of the way the mechanics were designed. And there's a lot of exploits you can utilize in the Outlast series, but one big exploit that Outlast 1 and the Whistleblower DLC have that Outlast 2 doesn't, because they actually fixed it, is you can mash the crouch button and the enemies cannot attack you. So you can get by enemies, they'll be completely frozen because they don't know how to interpret your status since you keep mashing the crouch button. Stop mashing once you get quite a distance away from them, and then just start running. the biggest exploit in this game, aside from a lot of out-of-bounds glitches that I myself have done a couple of times in this series that I'm not choosing to do because I don't want any walkthrough of mine to involve any kind of exploit unless it's for a section that is really poorly designed. And also, I feel like it gives the game a reputation it doesn't deserve. I feel like if you were to use exploits in a game like this, people would think, oh, you're so scared of this game that you're going to rely upon exploits. No, I don't want to do anything like that when it comes to games like this, because this game is not scary. But, going back to what I was saying, the crouching exploit works really well against a lot of enemies. The only enemies it doesn't really work effectively on are enemies that initiate instant kill attacks the moment they get near you on Nightmare difficulty or Insane difficulty. So, enemies like Chris Walker, if you are using the crouch exploit against Chris Walker and you release crouch when he is in your line of sight, he will grab you at phantom range and just kill you. So the way you bypass that is you go around the corner or you put a piece of geometry in the way so that he can't initiate his grab and he will instead opt to just run towards you. And speaking of Chris Walker, he's actually going to appear on this section right here after Jeremy comes very close to killing us, but of course William's going to get a lucky pass because Chris just appears and he scares off Jeremy, who, by the way, is the epitome of your cliched greedy asshole who tries to cover up everything that he's been doing illegally just to make money. You know, I really question what a lot of these greedy individuals try to do with their money. Do they just try to have the money just because they like to just have it be there? Or do they just like to caress all that money? Or do you just like to spend it on all sorts of expensive things? Because what exactly is that going to achieve later on in the future? That's just something I've never really understood about the greedy personality type. And just their loss of integrity, their loss of morals. All that just to get a bunch of money that is going to become useless in the future. Because the more they take, the less they'll have. Haven't they ever heard that phrase before? Jeremy's willing to have all these people killed, have all of these patients being experimented on, and have all these female patients just go through false pregnancies just to make money. I mean, how much does he really need? It makes no sense to me at all. Unless, of course, Jeremy is a sociopath, which I'm almost certain that every single member of Murkoff is a sociopath. And I don't really understand how Murkoff could possibly be around if every single employee is a sociopath, where they have no regard for human life whatsoever. I mean, I don't understand how a company gets formed in the real world, but I highly doubt the US government would allow these kind of corporations to exist. I mean, don't they ever manage these kind of corporations? Like, don't they ever do like regular checkups on the corporations to see if they're you know, doing okay, this and that? It's definitely clear that Murkoff is a very powerful corporation, and they've definitely been paying people off to ensure that they remain in power. And I think maybe their hiring process only allows people with sociopathic tendencies to be employed, because Murkoff, of course, is going to be doing a lot of illegal experiments in order to make a lot of money. I mean, I know it is mentioned that Murkoff is the world's leading supplier of biometric security, and that just seems like a legal firm, but how exactly do they do that and at the same time manage an asylum? I wonder what exactly Murkoff is. Is it some kind of conglomerate corporation that handles a lot of different things? I mean, how long has Murkoff been around in order for them to have the experience necessary to evade the proper authorities? You know, they'd have to be around as long as Mobius from The Evil Within in order to achieve the power necessary to essentially control most of the world. Of course, in Mobius' case, they were a very secretive organization. Nobody knew about them whatsoever. But with Murkoff, they're out in public. Everybody knows them. So how they've been able to get away with what they've been doing is just something that is so hard to contemplate. Just like how I can't contemplate how the security guard I ran past earlier said that I'm not human anymore, which I found to be the most hilarious and most ironic part of this DLC. The fact that he is saying that I am not human anymore just by looking at me, yet he is the one, among so many others, who has been allowing all of these corporate officials and scientists to experiment with the patients to essentially turn them into the monsters that you're seeing right now, all to enable the creation of this entity that uses nanomachines in order to structure its body and move around. That has to be one of the most hilarious statements I've ever heard in this game. And it's intentional, because they want you to contemplate it, and it's definitely something that I'm glad was put into the game. Because once again, Red Barrels clearly shows just how idiotic people are nowadays when it comes to making such statements like that. It's definitely clear that that guy did not read a lot of books. Maybe his IQ is all the way down into like the high school era for all I know. He probably doesn't know about the Nuremberg Code. Maybe he doesn't know about the Stanford prison trial. Maybe he doesn't know about the monster therapy sessions they were doing at that school. Those particular experiments represent a small percentage of experiments that really made you question the definition of humanity. And maybe if that stupid security guard actually read about them, and actually read books overall, maybe he wouldn't be the meathead that he already is, and voice such statements like that. I wouldn't be surprised if this guy sought sex, drugs, or religion for comfort, like the lazy individual that he is. Wow, what a retard. That guy is an absolute moron, as Waylon falls from quite a height and somehow survives. And now we are inside the female ward, which has absolutely no females for all you perverts out there who wanted to see what a naked female would look like in this game. And instead, we have two patients, both of them are male, and they are working together in an uneasy partnership, because the dominant of the relationship will try to kill the submissive if he does not get him what he desires. The submissive in this relationship is Dennis, and he has dissociative identity disorder, and it's called dissociative identity disorder, not multiple personality disorder, which has to be the dumbest name I've ever heard, because it's not multiple personalities present within an individual, it's the fracturing of one's own personality into just fragments. That is exactly what dissociative identity disorder is. And then the dominant of the relationship is Eddie Gluskin, and Eddie Gluskin is a perverted individual, and he has killed a lot of women, but because he doesn't have any women to experiment with in the female ward, he has instead been hunting down male patients who happen to stumble upon his area of Mount Massive Asylum, and he's tried to turn them into females so that he can enact whatever devious fantasies that he has. And I'm not even too sure what his fantasies are, because he comes across as wanting to be a husband and wanting to bear a child, but then at times he doesn't feel like that. I mean, I know he was sexually abused by his father or uncle, so it's definitely clear that his hypothalamus probably didn't learn control, so his sexual desires pretty much ran rampant. And I'm guessing like some woman he probably tried to curry in his favor did not like him whatsoever, and he did not really take the rejection well. So I imagine he's trying to reenact the moment where he potentially would have tried to get that woman pregnant, but it didn't really turn out the way he wanted. And no matter how many times he tries to recreate the effect, it will never satisfy his inner desires, so he just keeps on killing and killing and killing. Yeah, the game doesn't really specify if he has actually tried to, be in a relationship with someone and they betrayed him. And that right there was kind of gruesome. And Waylon describes it as mocking the idea of pregnancy. So it's definitely clear he hates someone in his life. And I'm just wondering what all his female victims look like. Maybe he has a specific type of woman that he enjoys. I mean, I know he admires certain characteristics on some of his victims, which is why he tries to cut off like a lot of unsightly hairs, and he admires like the silky smooth skin and all the stuff like that. But I really don't think he's worth contemplating, because he's a very annoying character. That's all I'll say. And that right there, Eddie Gluskin will kill you instantly, so you're going to have to use the environment to your advantage when it comes to getting past him in that encounter. So you lure him over there, and then you just mantle over the two desks. And then for this encounter right here, he's going to be forced to walk. A lot of people just run away from him immediately because they don't realize that he's being forced to walk in that moment. I'm not going to run away immediately because I just want to prove to you guys that he does not try to run in this sequence. And he can actually lose you if you remain out of his line of sight long enough. So he spawns in when you try to move this out of the way. And he's going to mantle over the table. You can actually see him spawn right behind the shelving. And right now, he's trying to get to me, but his pathing is not the best. And I'm eventually going to crouch and just hide from him, and he's going to lose me. And you'll know he's lost you because he stands still for a very long time, indicating he's lost you. And he's should be doing it right... Yeah, there he is. He's doing it right now. So he doesn't know where I am. I mean, he can still kind of see you when you're near the table at some weird angle. And he's further away from the table. But it doesn't matter. Because he will never ever try to run at you. And yeah, I'm just trolling him right now. I do this a lot with him. There's even a glitch that can occur in one of the encounters with him where you can actually spawn in 2 Eddie Gluskins. I don't remember how it works, but it's something you don't want to do because after you do the little sequence where you kill him, the second Eddie Gluskin will kill you when you recover from the animation. So you obviously don't want to do that on insane difficulty. But right now, we're being introduced to a design that's only exclusive to the Whistleblower DLC, where Waylon's leg has been critically injured, so this is going to impact your ability to sprint. So you will not be able to sprint very fast, and you will also not have the ability to jump. I mean, you can still jump to vents, but you have to do the animation to do so. But you cannot use the jump whatsoever when it comes to dodging him. Not that you can dodge him, because his grab will just bypass your jump animation. Of course, the crouch exploit still works against Eddie Gluskin, but just like Chris Walker, you have to make sure that you put some geometry between yourself and Eddie so that he doesn't grab you with phantom range. And this whole limping system, it doesn't really change the flow of the chase sequences because Eddie moves at a rather modest pace for this upcoming chase sequence. And then, for the final chase sequence with him, he moves at his full speed, so he's going to be able to catch up to you while you're limping. And that's really the only time this limping system actually impacts the flow of the chase sequences. But we now have a 5-minute long cutscene coming up that I've thankfully edited out. But I'm still including the moments where this clearly shows why The Last of Us Part 2 is not the most violent game ever, because this game and this DLC definitely show that they're willing to go beyond the limits of what's actually necessary when it comes to showcasing violence. And there was a lucky pass moment just then. I don't know where that guy comes from, or how he just happened to attack Eddie while he was busy cutting into the main character. But it's just so silly thinking about it. And now we have our clothes again. And I think this is actually a good time to talk about my original thoughts on Outlast. So, back when I was still the ignorant player that I was, I originally thought Outlast was the best horror series out there, and I did not like Resident Evil, but after playing Outlast 2 and understanding just how flawed the horror in the Outlast series is, I started to despise Outlast, and I came to like Resident Evil. It was definitely an interesting experience for me. I mean, I think the only reason Outlast 2 had a lot more impact was because I did not watch any kind of gameplay from other YouTubers before actually playing the game. Outlast 1, I had seen gameplay before actually playing the game myself. And then with Outlast 2, I just played the game myself, and it elicited a different kind of reaction. And that's when I definitely had my eyes opened as to why the horror in Outlast isn't the best. And it's definitely why I still kind of feel a bit of unease when it comes to seeing particular moments where the characters are chasing you and they're doing all those motions with their hands. And I think subconsciously, my previous self believes that this game is still very scary, but through my experiences with many other horror games after this, I know for sure that my subconscious is not really being honest with me right now. And I think that's just one of the greatest things about games like Resident Evil 4 and games like the Outlast series. You know, with Resident Evil 4, you're taught that fear is essentially an illusion, and that all the smoke and mirror aspects that you see in a lot of survival horror games are there to try to make it seem like the horror is there, when in actuality it isn't. The greatest example I can give of this is when enemies have exaggerated characteristics. Like, the enemies in Resident Evil 4 flinch consistently because that's how guns are supposed to work, but in games like Resident Evil 2 Remake, where the enemies don't flinch whatsoever, that's just an artificial handicap. That's just something that is exaggerated to make it seem like they're just threatening enemy, when in actuality they aren't. And that is the kind of smoke and mirror aspect I don't really like, and it's the kind of smoke and mirror aspects that the Outlast series embraces, which is why it's a very flawed series. And going through Resident Evil 4 and the Outlast series, it's been a very enlightening experience when it comes to shaping my experiences with fear in these kind of games. But did you notice how I closed that door just then? It's very important that you have that door closed, and then you need to make sure you do not approach that dead body before doing this. So you need to open this up, and then you can grab the key. And what this will allow you to do is get more of a head start on Eddie Gluskin, because he's going to always be right behind you, and you're going to be able to get to the vent without any hassle. The only problem is Eddie runs very fast on this section, and something I forgot to mention, you might have noticed that there was a mechanic where you can look behind you while sprinting. Never ever do that when you're in the chase sequence, because what it does is it slows you down, so it allows the enemies to catch up to you very quickly when you're in that animation. If you do it with Eddie, he will always catch up with you, and he will grab you. So right now, he's breathing down my neck, and I'm even going to turn around when I get inside of the vent just to showcase how close he is to actually catching me. And can you hear the music right now? There's 2 pieces of music playing. It's definitely clear that the developers were not planning for players trying to do exactly what I did just then, where I try to access that door before picking up the key. That's pretty hilarious that it works like that, and it definitely shows this game's indie roots and why it's not so much of a AAA title. But now for the DLC's second to last Lucky Pass moment, where for some reason Eddie just punches Waylon and he doesn't try to kill him whatsoever with a knife. And yeah, he's very furious with Waylon that he was not able to enact his fantasies. And a lot of people have really wondered how Eddie was able to kill this many people, and I completely agree with him. It doesn't make any sense for one man to kill this many people. This would take the coordination of a team. And with this many individuals, it's definitely clear that Eddie's devolving. It's this whole fantasy that he's been trying to satisfy has just become the only thing he's been thinking about. If he was doing these murders out in the real world, then he would have most likely been caught by now, but, you know, he's in a lawless world. He's free to do whatever he wants because Murkoff allows it. But Waylon is somehow going to be able to get out of this very tight situation because the ceiling just collapses. And now you're going to have to use your own weight to pull Eddie up and kill him. How interesting that there have been a lot of characters who have commented on Waylon and Miles' weight, but Waylon is the only character who actually makes that particular statement true, with the fact that he was able to use his own weight to pull Eddie up and get entangled in his own contraption. And now, Eddie's dead. There are no more threats you have to deal with, and all you need to do now is get to the lobby of Mount Massive Asylum and escape. And can you call this Waylon killing Eddie? I mean, it was almost an indirect method of killing. You know, I'm amazed that they trimmed out the moment where Miles ends up accidentally killing a patient when he grabs onto him by just chucking him off a ledge. But then they didn't bother changing this up. Seems a little strange that Red Barrels would do that. I guess because they thought Miles killing that one patient was an almost direct form of killing, even if it was accidental and wasn't really planned. But this one was accidental and planned, and yet somehow they didn't edit it out. But there are a bunch of Murkoff soldiers around here, but they aren't a threat. They're just there for cinematic purposes. You'll see gunfire everywhere. They're going to be killing all the patients to retake control of the asylum. And there aren't any moments where you have to deal with the security guards. I guess it's because they want you to settle on the victory that you achieved over Eddie Gluskin. Seems like a very satisfying kill, but it's not really that satisfying when you consider that Waylon just happened to get very lucky, and that's something I can never stand about Lucky Pass moments. Because then when you just get the moments where the villains are just killed, it just becomes like a Deus Ex Machina. You know, with Martha being killed at the end of Outlast 2, where she comes very close to killing Blake, but the cross from the top of the church just impales Martha randomly. It just sounds really stupid with the way I'm explaining it. And it's not very cool when you actually see it in the game. It just comes out of nowhere. And you can't really expect a lot of emotional weight behind that. I mean, right now, this music that's playing right now, it definitely elicits emotional weight, knowing that you finally reached the end of the game. But of course, Jeremy, being the corporate asshole that he is going to try to stop you. Yeah, he's willing to do everything he can to protect all that hard-earned money he has received through illegal activities. It's really at this point where you gotta question if Jeremy's even human, because I don't think any human being would ever have the commitment necessary to try to silence the truth in order to just keep all that money safe and secure. I mean, you see it portrayed a lot in the movies, but I just don't feel like that's reflected as to how a human would behave in real life. I mean, I'm sure they would do it to some degree, but then eventually it's gotta sink in that this is just really stupid. I guess Murkoff chooses their supervisor as well, and all those other employees that are just equally as bad as Jeremy. Although I suppose when you think of politics, I mean, a lot of people consider politicians to be bad seeds. So I guess with the fact that politicians are still around and, you know, that we elect a lot of idiots to power, I guess we ourselves are partly to blame for these kind of people getting into power a lot of the times. But I'm gonna say it again, how can this many employees inside of a corporation be this sociopathic in their tendencies? It just goes beyond the national average, I assume. It makes no sense to me. How has this company not been exposed yet? I imagine Murkoff has bigger pockets and greater degrees of power than the President of the United States if they're able to get away with all the acts that they're able to do. Oh man, it's just so silly thinking about it. It's just such an enigma. The whole entire Outlast universe is such an enigma with the way they just portray a lot of the characters in this whole entire universe. But there's Miles. He's now fully taken over by the Wall Rider. Although apparently, in the comics, he's dead. And then somehow, Billy Hope has been able to regain control over the Wall Rider. I don't really understand how that's possible. But let's not dwell on that too much. But we're about to meet up with Simon Peacock. That is his name, Simon Peacock. What a strange name. And he's a fellow whistleblower who used to work for the company. And for some reason, he's portrayed as being a zombie, essentially. Somehow he's a decayed corpse in the comic, and he's able to resist being taken down by bullets. I don't know how that's possible, or where he had the capabilities necessary to do that. And I'm not too sure what Red Barrels was trying to go for with portraying him like that. But it is just very odd. But all you need to do now is upload the footage that is somehow on the camcorder, even though I haven't been using the camcorder for this walkthrough. And that will be the end of the DLC. So stay tuned for my Outlast 2 Insane Difficulty walkthrough. Thank you all for watching, and you take care now.